Hi, Sarah Jacobs here. If you're divorced, divorcing, or separated in New Jersey and you have kids, today's topic is for you. Whether your child is 6 or 16, at some point, the issue of a car, purchasing it, and all that goes with it is going to arise in your family. And if you're having those conversations now with your co parent, what's on your mind is how all things automotive are going to be funded and whether the child support you're paying or receiving gets factored in. First, let's get back to basics and talk about child support in general. There are a lot of ways to pay child support in New Jersey, but one of the most popular is paying pursuant to the guidelines. The guidelines are intended to cover a lot, though parents in New Jersey would say that that is not the case. And transportation is one of those covered expenses. So if you pay child support or receive it through the guidelines, expenses for a car related to your child cover, right? Short answer, no. When looking at Appendix 9A to the child support guidelines, which is basically the roadmap for what child support is supposed to cover, and looking at the transportation section, it's clear that the transportation costs covered by the guidelines are supposed to help supplement the proportional cost to the parent for use of the parent's vehicle while transporting their children around. But what's most important is not what the transportation definition includes, but what's written in the appendix specifically as to what the definition excludes. The exclusion applies to any expenses incurred for a motor vehicle that is purchased and primarily intended to be used by a child who's subject to the support order. So we just finished discussing what happens if you're paying child support pursuant to the guidelines and what the guideline definition covers. Well, what if you're paying support outside of the guidelines? What if you're paying direct support from one parent to the other? The next logical question is, what then? Am I still responsible for paying for a car and car-related expenses for my child? The typical answer is maybe. It's really fact dependent. Are you already divorced? If your marital settlement agreement is silent on the issue of automobiles for the children and expenses related to those automobiles, the answer could be yes, you're responsible for proportional payment. If your settlement agreement does talk about what you and your co-parent intended to do with regard to automobiles and payments related to automobiles, it's best to reread your marital settlement agreement and figure out what you agreed to and what you didn't. If you're in the process of getting divorced now is the time to deal with these topics in your settlement agreement. You should be speaking to your lawyer about what you should include, how you should include it, and making sure that the language is very detailed so when the issue comes up in the future, you're covered. We wouldn't be talking about the law if it wasn't complicated and nuanced. So let's talk about the situation where you're supposed to receive guideline child support, and either your settlement agreement excludes expenses for child's car or car-related expenses, or is silent, or the situation where your agreement is not yet written, but the guidelines specifically exclude these expenses. The answer here would be for you and your co-parent to discuss modifying the original support obligation to cover some of these expenses. You can either include the cost for an automobile for the children and expenses related to that automobile, or potentially include the guideline support that you are receiving or paying to include contribution to the other parent's insurance policy to cover a newly licensed driver. In any scenario, the most important takeaway is to learn that all of your bases should be covered. If you're paying or receiving child support and car expenses for your kids are on the horizon, now is the time to take a look at whether your settlement agreement includes or excludes those things, or if you're negotiating your divorce terms to include them. Speaking to a family lawyer is critical. The good news, we've done this a lot of times. We're here to help. We look forward to talking with you.